One ordinary vegetable has helped decide elections, bankrupted farmers, and forced governments into crisis. Not gold, not oil, not some rare spice worth a king's ransom. An onion. It sounds impossible. Today, it's one of the cheapest things in your kitchen. You buy a bag without thinking. You slice one into a pan. Your eyes sting for a minute, and then you forget about it. But history never forgot the onion. Workers were fed with it. Soldiers marched with it. Families survived brutal winters because of it. In some places, people paid their rent with it. Kings were buried with it, believing it would follow them into the next world. And then something even stranger happened. The humble vegetable that fed the poorest kitchens became powerful enough to make fortunes, bankrupt farmers, and shake entire governments. In one extraordinary scheme, two men tried to control almost every onion in one of America's biggest markets. They crashed prices, ruined growers, and triggered a law that still exists today. In another part of the world, rising onion prices became so serious that governments stepped in, exports were banned, emergency stockpiles were opened, and elections were changed, all because of onions. So this isn't really a story about a vegetable. It's a story about survival, about trust, about the quiet things that hold civilizations together long after the kings have disappeared. History remembers crowns, palaces, and famous battles. But civilizations were carried by ordinary things that almost nobody bothered to write about. The onion is one of those things. So here's the question this whole story is going to answer. How did one humble vegetable become both the food of the poor and a force powerful enough to shake governments? To find the answer, we have to go back, way back, before supermarkets, before money, before farms, to a world with a desperate problem, and no idea that a small bulb hiding beneath the ground was about to become one of humanity's most dependable companions. Let's begin where the hunger began. The world before onions. Picture the world long, long ago. No fridges, no cans, no freezers. Catch a fish in the morning and it's rotten by night. Pick fruit and you eat it fast, or you lose it. Food was a race against time, and time always won. Now imagine you're a traveler. You need to cross a desert. The journey will take weeks. What do you pack? Bread goes stale, meat spoils, fruit turns to mush. You could starve halfway there, surrounded by food that had already gone bad. This wasn't a small worry. It was one of the biggest problems in all of human history. Villages faced it, traders faced it, armies faced it, whole cities faced it. If you couldn't store food, you couldn't plan. You lived meal to meal, always afraid of the next empty season. Life was hard in other ways too. People worked from sunrise to sunset, farming, building, digging. That kind of work burns huge amounts of energy. Harvests weren't always kind either. One bad summer and crops failed. A whole village could go hungry. Think about what people truly needed. Food that was easy to grow, even in poor soil. Food that could last a long time without rotting. Food that traveled well. Food cheap enough that even the poorest family could have some. That is a long list. Almost nothing on earth could do all of it. And yet, humanity needed something exactly like an onion long before anyone had figured out how to grow one. The problem was already there. The answer was still hiding in the ground. The vegetable that refused to die long ago, onions did not grow on farms. They grew wild, somewhere across Central Asia, in the dry, rough land near what is now India, Iran, and Afghanistan. Small, wild onions pushed up through the dirt. Nobody planted them. Nobody watered them. They just grew. That is the whole secret. Onions are tough, really tough. They grow in poor soil. They survive cold. They handle heat. They don't need gentle weather or perfect care. When early people found them, something clicked. Picture that first moment. A hungry person, digging in the dry ground for anything to eat. Up comes a small round bulb. They smelled it. Sharp, strong, alive. They tasted it. Powerful. Maybe their eyes watered a little, but it was food. Real food, growing wild and free. Then they noticed something even better. You could keep an onion. Most food back then spoiled in days. An onion, kept cool and dry, could last for months. That was almost like magic to people who lost most of their food to rot. So they saved the seeds, then planted them on purpose, then chose the biggest, strongest bulbs to grow again. Little by little, wild onions became crops. This is why people never gave up on them. Onions almost never failed. If your wheat died, if your fruit rotted, If your hunt came back empty, you could still walk to your onion patch and pull up a meal. In a scary, unpredictable world, the onion was dependable. People have been growing it for thousands and thousands of years. Some experts think it may be one of the oldest crops humans ever farmed. That's not a passing trend. That's almost all of human history, tied to one small, stubborn plant. Sometimes, civilization doesn't grow because of the flashiest thing. Sometimes, it grows because of the one plant that refuses to fail. The onion refused to fail, so people kept planting it. That single decision was about to change everything. The vegetable that fed civilizations. Let's travel to ancient Egypt. The sun is blazing. The air shimmers with heat. In the distance, something impossible is rising out of the desert. A pyramid. Thousands of workers move stones so heavy, it makes your arms ache just to imagine it. They drag, they lift, they sweat. Day after day, under a sun that never rests. Work like that needs fuel. Real fuel. Every single day. So what did these workers eat? Bread, beer, and onions. Near the pyramids, archaeologists found a whole town where the workers lived. Homes, bakeries, places where huge amounts of bread and thick beer were made. Picture the crew's meal. Bread in one hand, a cup of thick beer, and sharp, fresh onions to go with it. That was the fuel that helped build a wonder of the world. There's a story people have told for over 2,000 years. A Greek traveler named Herodotus visited the Great Pyramid. He said writing on it listed how much was spent on radishes, onions, and garlic for the workers. It's a great story, but we should be honest. Many historians today don't fully trust it. They think Herodotus was probably given wrong information, and the writing was likely about something else, maybe gifts for a dead king, not a grocery bill. So we can't be sure of the story. We do know this for certain. Onions were a normal, everyday food for ordinary Egyptians, rich and poor alike. There's a bigger idea hiding inside all this. A food you can store is a food you can survive on. Think about it. When you can keep onions for months, you can make it through a bad winter. You can feed a city when the fresh harvest is gone. You can hold a work crew together on a project that takes years. Dependable, storable food is what lets large groups of people stay in one place and build something. Before you can raise monuments, you have to survive the lean months. Civilizations are fed before they are famous. Onions were doing the feeding. The soldier's companion. Now imagine a soldier. He's marching. Has been for hours, maybe days. His armor is heavy. His feet are sore. The road never seems to end. He is far from home, far from any market, far from any warm kitchen. And he is hungry. An army can't stop to hunt every day. It has to keep moving. It has to keep fighting. So what feeds an army on the march? Whatever is simple, cheap, and won't go bad. Onions fit perfectly. Roman soldiers ate onions along with grain, cheese, and a little meat. Their food had to be tough and portable, just like them. Onions could be carried, stored, and dropped into a simple stew at the end of a brutal day. The Greeks went further. Long before, their athletes trained for the Olympic Games, and people believed onions made you stronger, so athletes ate them by the pound. Some drank onion juice. Some even rubbed onions on their skin before a contest. Did that make them better athletes? Almost certainly not. Still, it shows how much people believed in this vegetable. Onions traveled to the very edges of the known world, too. On a remote island off the coast of Sweden, far from where onions first grew, archaeologists found a burnt onion around 1,500 years old. Think about that journey. A plant from the dry lands of Central Asia, ending up on a cold northern island. War has a truth people forget. Battles are won by strong soldiers. Wars are won by fed soldiers. The bravest army in the world, if it starves, loses. Much later, during the American Civil War, a famous general named Ulysses S. Grant knew this deep in his bones. His army needed onions and didn't have any. So he sent a message. He said he would not move his army another step without onions. A general, in the middle of a war, refusing to march over onions. He wasn't being fussy. His soldiers needed to stay healthy, and onions helped. A sick army is a losing army. Reliable food doesn't just fill stomachs. It moves armies, and moving armies move history. More than food. Somewhere along the way, the onion became more than something to eat. It became medicine. It became a symbol. It became magic, at least in people's minds. Ancient healers used onions for all kinds of problems. Sore throats, wounds, aches and pains. If you felt ill, someone likely handed you an onion. An old Roman writer named Pliny the Elder listed onions as a cure for many things. Eye troubles, toothaches, wounds that wouldn't heal. We have to be careful here, and honest. Did onions truly cure all those things? Not the way people believed. Most old remedies were built on hope and guesswork, not proof. But they weren't completely wrong either. Onions do contain useful natural compounds. That's why, even in later wars, people sometimes put onion juice on wounds when nothing else was around. Not magic, but not nothing. Then there's the folklore. Some people hung onions in their homes, believing the strong smell kept sickness or bad luck away. Was that real? No. But it shows how deeply the onion had rooted itself into people's imaginations. In ancient Egypt, the feeling went deeper still. The Egyptians, one Roman observer noted, treated onions almost like gods. They would even swear promises by them. Cut an onion in half and look closely. Ring inside ring, round and round, never seeming to end. To the Egyptians, those endless rings looked like eternity, like life that never stops. So they placed onions in tombs to travel with the dead. One of the most surprising facts in this whole story turned up inside a royal tomb. When scientists studied the mummy of a pharaoh named Ramesses IV, they found small onions placed right in his eye sockets. Onions, for the eyes of a king, to help him in the world beyond. Food, medicine, belief. The onion had become all three, the everyday hero. Let's leave the kings and soldiers behind for a moment and go somewhere quieter. A small home. Long ago, deep in winter. Outside, it's cold and grey. The fields are bare. There's not much food left. Inside, a grandmother stands over a pot. She doesn't have meat. She barely has anything, but she has onions. She always has onions. She stored them in the autumn, and they kept, just like they always do. So she slices them. She drops them into the pot with a little water, a little bread, whatever scraps she has. Slowly, the kitchen fills with a warm, deep smell. Soup. That soup keeps a whole family alive through the cold months. This scene happened millions of times, in millions of homes, across thousands of years. Poor families, working families, families with almost nothing. For them, the onion wasn't a luxury. It was a lifeline. It stretched a little food into a real meal. It added flavor when there was nothing else. It filled bellies when the harvest had been thin. Kings had feasts. Rich people had spices from far away. But ordinary people had onions. Onions never asked for much. They grew for the poor just as happily as for the powerful. Most people who ever lived were not kings. They were ordinary. They worked hard, ate simply, and looked after their families. The food that carried them through was not some royal treasure. It was the humble onion. Some of history's greatest foods never belonged to kings at all. They belonged to everyone. Yet almost nobody expects what came next. This vegetable of the poor, this constant friend of the grandmother's kitchen, was about to become something people would fight over, gamble on, and try to own down to the very last bulb. The vegetable that became money. Start with one simple truth. Wherever people went, onions went too. Traders packed them. Travelers carried them. Settlers planted them in new lands. Onions made it easy. They stored well, so they survived long journeys. They grew almost anywhere. They were cheap, so everyone wanted them. Picture a busy market in the Middle Ages. The square is packed. People shout prices. Chickens squawk. Mud squelches underfoot. Stalls heap with bread, cloth, tools. There, in the middle of it all, sit the onions. Not the fanciest thing for sale, but maybe the most useful. Every family needs them. Every cook wants them. They sell fast, and they sell everywhere. Now, something that will surprise you. Onions were once so valued in parts of Europe that people could use them to help pay their rent. They were handed over as gifts. They were given as payment. Sit with that for a second. A vegetable. Used almost like money. Why? Because everyone needed it. Everyone wanted it. And it didn't rot on the way to market. That is exactly what makes something valuable. That is almost what makes something money. And so, one basket at a time, one market at a time, the onion spread across the whole world. Today it's grown in almost every country on Earth. Our planet now produces more than 100 million tons of them every single year. 100 million tons of onions. The onion had become one of the most trusted, wanted, everywhere things alive. And that is where the danger hides. When something is that valuable and that needed, sooner or later someone looks at it and thinks a dangerous thought. What if I could control all of it? What if I owned every onion and set the price myself? It sounds impossible. Someone tried anyway. The Onion King. Now the story turns strange. About 70 years ago, in America, onions weren't only food anymore. They were big business, bought and sold in giant trading halls, right alongside wheat and gold. Get this. For a while, onions were the single most traded product in one of America's biggest exchanges. 1 out of every 5 trades. Onions. The humble bulb had come a long way from the grandmother's soup pot. 2 men saw a chance. One was a farmer and trader. People later called him the Onion King. Along with a partner, he hatched a wild plan. They would buy onions. All of them. Not just some. Nearly every onion in the whole city of Chicago, one of the country's great onion hubs. Truckloads rolled in, then more. Millions and millions of pounds piled into storage. By the time they were done, these 2 men controlled almost every onion in the market, around 98%, held by 2 people. Now they could do something incredible. They could set the price. Then they got greedy, and clever, and cruel. They went to the onion farmers and made a deal. Then they secretly bet, big, that the price of onions was about to crash. And then they made it crash. On purpose. They flooded the market with their mountain of onions, all at once. Suddenly there were onions everywhere. Way too many. The price fell off a cliff. A bag of onions that had cost nearly $3 dropped to about 10 cents. At the very bottom, it got so bad that a 50-pound bag of onions was worth less than the empty bag that held it. Read that again. The bag was worth more than the onions inside it. Those 2 men made a fortune from their secret bet. The onion farmers, many were wiped out, ruined. Their whole year's harvest, suddenly worth almost nothing. Some went bankrupt. The country was furious. This is where onions did something no other vegetable has ever done. The government stepped in. A young congressman, a man named Gerald Ford, who would one day become president of the United States, pushed for a brand new law. The law banned people from trading onions the way they'd traded them before. It passed. That law is still in force today. To this day, in the United States, onions are the only food you are not allowed to trade in that special way. Not wheat, not corn, not gold, just onions. One vegetable. So wild, so able to make and destroy fortunes, that a whole nation wrote a one-of-a-kind law just for it. Still think it's just an onion? From fields to factories. Let's step back from the drama for a moment, into the modern world. For most of history, growing onions was slow, back-breaking work. Planted by hand, weeded by hand, pulled from the ground by hand. Then machines arrived. Almost overnight, farmers could plant more and harvest more than ever. Onions could be grown on enormous farms, bigger than anything before. Storing them got smarter too. People built cool, dry warehouses and learned exactly how to keep onions fresh for months, so they could be sold all year. Then came trucks, trains, and ships. Picture a modern onion farm at harvest. Rows stretch out as far as you can see. Big machines roll along, lifting thousands of onions in the time it once took to pull up a single basket by hand. The tough little wild bulb had become a giant global industry, feeding billions. 2 countries lead the world in growing onions, India and China. Together, they grow more than half of all the onions on the entire planet. On average, each person on Earth eats around 14 pounds of onions every year. 14 pounds per person. That's a lot of chopping. Scientists study onions now too. They've found onions contain natural compounds that may be good for us. Vitamins, antioxidants, which help protect our cells. Still, we need to stay honest. Just like before, onions are healthy. That's true. But an onion is not a miracle cure. Anyone who says a single vegetable cures serious illness is stretching the truth. The real story is simpler and better. Onions are a genuinely good, everyday food. And we now grow them in numbers the ancient world could never have dreamed of. Which means more people depend on them than ever before in all of history. That, as we're about to see, is exactly why they remain dangerous. The onion that shook governments. Remember that empty supermarket shelf we imagined at the very start? Here is the twist. It isn't imaginary. Let's go to India, one of the biggest onion countries on Earth. Onions are in almost every meal. They're the heart of countless dishes. Families cook with them every single day, which means when onion prices rise, everyone feels it, instantly. In India, that's not just a kitchen problem, it's a national one. When onion prices shoot up, people get angry, furious. Newspapers put it on the front page. Ordinary families feel cheated, and that anger can turn into votes. The price of onions has actually been blamed for helping decide an Indian election. Onions climbed, and a government paid the price at the ballot box. Let that sink in. A vegetable, helping decide who runs a country. So governments there watch onions like hawks. A few years ago, onion prices in India started climbing fast. So the government did something dramatic. It banned onions from being sold to other countries. It wanted to keep every onion at home, to bring the price down for its own people. Then came the ripple. Nearby countries depended on those onions. In Bangladesh, when the ban hit, onion prices nearly doubled almost overnight. People rushed to buy. Traders raised prices. Families who were already struggling suddenly paid twice as much for a basic ingredient. There is no remedy for us, one shopper said. Nepal felt it. Sri Lanka felt it. The shockwave spread across borders, all from one country's onion decision. Maybe the most amazing part is what India does now to protect itself. It keeps a huge national reserve of onions, hundreds of thousands of tons, stored away, ready to be released the moment prices spike. Picture that. A country keeping an emergency stockpile of onions. The same way nations store fuel or grain for a crisis, they store onions. That empty shelf in our imaginary supermarket. For millions of real people, in our own time, it has come true. The onion never stopped being powerful. It simply went unnoticed, waiting in your kitchen until the day the supply broke. The onion in your kitchen. So now we arrive back where we started. Today, right now, somewhere in the world, thousands of onions are being sliced this very second. Think about your own day. That burger you love, onions in it. Pizza, onions in the sauce. Curry, stir-fry, pasta, soup, salsa, stew, onions. Travel the world with your taste buds for a moment. In France, cooks simmer onions for hours into a rich, golden soup. In India, they're the base of curry after curry. In Mexico, chopped raw over tacos. In China, tossed sizzling into a hot pan. Different countries, different flavors. One vegetable in common. It's the unsung hero of kitchens everywhere. So common we barely notice it. We chop it, toss it in, and move on. But pause for a second. That ordinary onion on your cutting board is the same kind that fed pyramid workers. The same kind that marched with Roman soldiers. The same kind that filled a grandmother's winter soup pot. The same kind two men once tried to own every last one of. The same kind that can still shake a government today. Nothing about it has really changed. It's still cheap, still easy to store, still grows almost anywhere, still makes food taste better, still dependable. That's why the onion is still here. Not because anyone protected it, not because it was rare, but because, again and again, across every age, it did exactly what people needed. It fed them. Because everyone needed it, the onion gained a power all its own. The power to feed nations, and to unsettle them. The onion never stopped being useful. So people never stopped growing it, and they never stopped depending on it. Conclusion. Let's return to that kitchen one last time. It's evening. Dinner is starting. Someone picks up an onion, peels off the papery skin, sets it on the board. The knife comes down. Their eyes begin to sting. Tears well up. They blink and rub their eyes. Why does this happen? The answer is beautiful. When you cut an onion, you break tiny parts inside it. Chemicals that were kept apart suddenly mix. They react and make a special gas that floats up into the air. That gas drifts into your eyes. It touches the wet surface of your eyeball. There it turns into a tiny, weak bit of acid. Your eyes feel the sting. They do the only thing they can. They cry to wash it away. That's it. That's the onion tear's mystery. Just chemistry. The onion isn't being cruel. It's only protecting itself, the way it always has. So there they stand, chopping away, eyes watering, thinking about dinner. Nothing about the moment seems special. But look closer. Hidden inside that ordinary onion is an extraordinary story. Ancient workers who built wonders of the world, soldiers who marched across empires, kings who took onions into the afterlife, grandmothers stirring soup to keep their families alive, two men who tried to own every onion in a country, Whole nations, in our own time, that panic and stockpile and vote when the onions run short. All of that, folded inside those quiet little rings. We started with a question. How did one humble vegetable become both the food of the poor and a force strong enough to shake the powerful? Now you know. It grew when other crops failed. It lasted when other food spoiled. It fed the poor and the mighty alike. It spread everywhere and became so trusted it was almost like money. And because the whole world came to lean on it, the onion gained a quiet power, enough to make fortunes, ruin farmers, and rattle governments. Not with armies, not with gold, but with something rarer. By being the one thing almost everyone, almost everywhere, could not do without. So the next time you cut one open and your eyes start to water, remember this. You're not just making dinner. You're holding one of the most dependable and most powerful friends in all of human history. And every time an onion is sliced, history quietly returns to the table.